Hello, my name is Lloyd F. Reese. I'm your host, and I'd like to welcome you to Black Perspectives. The topic of today's show is law enforcement then and now. At this time, I'd like to welcome Leroy D. Baca, Sheriff of Los Angeles County. Sheriff, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Reese.
Pleasure to have you here. Now, Sheriff, you're the 30th elected sheriff that commands 15,000 personnel, supported by a $1.5 billion budget. There are 25 sheriff stations serving 41 contract cities, and the sheriff department directly and indirectly serves over 10 million people. That's a large responsibility, sir.
Large responsibility includes the largest jail system and largest court system in the country as well.
Now, the sheriff's organization is divided into 10 divisions.
Yes.
Now, you have, within each division, we have a chief that's over each division?
Yes, we do.
Now, you would explain to our viewers what those divisions are, Chief? Sheriff?
Yes, essentially the divisions are as follows. We have a Chief of Court Services Division, where approximately 2,000 people are working for the Sheriff's Department and the courts. We have a Correctional Services Division, where we're doing programs of recovery and rehabilitation and counseling and drug abuse and spiritual development for the inmates. Then there is the Custody Division that's hand in hand with the process of the criminal justice system that manages the housing and the food and the things that are necessary to keep the system alive. And then there's a Chief of the Detective Division, a Chief of the Standards and Training Division, a Chief of the 3 Field Operations Division, where those 25 sheriff stations are deployed. Then there's a Chief of the Technical Services Division, and then one of our fiscal administration. So when you put it all together, it's quite a large team.
Now, Sheriff, let's talk about yourself. You've been with the Sheriff's organization for 33 years.
When I was elected 33 years, I'm now in my 36th year on the department.
That's a long time, Sheriff.
Long time. I came in 1965. We did things without the modern technology. In those days, it was considered pretty modern. But compared to then and now, today, we're really up into the technology thing.
Now, I really want our viewers to know that you've worked your way up through the ranks.
Indeed. I started as a deputy and had an Associate of Arts degree from East Los Angeles College, and I'm really grateful to the department because it gives its employees a chance to advance. And so I went through deputy to sergeant to lieutenant to captain to commander to chiefs, and then as a chief I ran for the position of sheriff.
Your dedication to education, I mean, you stress that often. You love the mentoring programs.
Yes, I have a doctorate degree in public administration, from USC, and my belief is that you never stop learning, that we're always in school, we're always on training, that the spirit of the Sheriff's Department should be a learning organization, and I think we've set that in motion.
When you came on the department in '65, there were a lot of things that were going on within the city of Los Angeles. That was the same year that we had the '65 riots.
The riots that occurred a week before I hired on, and then, of course, after that, we normally I was assigned to the jails as one of my first assignments. 13 months later, I went to East Los Angeles Station, worked in a patrol car, and then it was on the way. I was on the way.
Now, Sheriff, were you affected by affirmative action at all anytime during your career?
No, the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the subsequent changes in the law did not take effect until early 70s when it came to labor law enhancements. All of my particular promotions at that time were in the open competitive field, and I think what then occurred is that we recognized that we needed to improve our diversity in the Sheriff's Department, and so more outreach was being done.
Do you feel that in your earlier career that there was a problem with minorities in law enforcement as far as becoming police officers or sheriffs, marshals?
Yeah, I think that the Sheriff's Department in its first 75 years plus was an organization that was essentially not diverse, basically a white male organization. And I didn't see much evidence of greater diversity until the 1950s going forward, and it really didn't kick in until around the mid-60s.
Now, I recall in my research that the first female sheriff was hired in 1912.
Well, that's an interesting point, and it wasn't a job that you and I would see today with them having the same responsibilities as the men. And it wasn't until the early 70s when I was a lieutenant at East Los Angeles Station where women finally had the chance to work in a radio car. So it's only been 30 years in the Sheriff's Department, and I think probably more like 22 or 3 years with the LAPD, that they've had women working in radio cars.
Now, you've even had your first African-American female chief, Helena.
Yes, Chief Ashby worked together with me when I was a chief, and I was pleased to see that Sheriff Block had promoted her not only as the first African-American person, meaning woman, to be a chief, but the first woman, period, to be a chief.
Now, the position that you once held as the chief of courtroom services, there's an African-American in that position now, Roy Pugh.
Yes, Chief Roy Pugh has an extensive amount of experience in law enforcement, and he served significantly up to the position of captain when he was in the marshal's office, and then he promoted to commander, and then I promoted him to chief.
Now, Pugh came up through the ranks just like you did, right? From a deputy and worked his way up?
Came up through the ranks, touched all the bases, and has a great background for being a chief.
Now, the 12 top spots that are in the sheriff's organization, two of those positions are held by African-American men, and the chief of detectives is a female.
Yes, I think that's important. These are highly qualified people who have worked diligently and taken examinations and promoted on the basis of their qualifications, and so we've got top-notch folks.
How are those positions appointed, Chief? Do you appoint those positions, or how does that happen?
No, I as the sheriff have the ability to appoint individuals from the commander position, and I can select those individuals based on their qualifications and based on what I believe their talent will allow for me to assign them to a proper division. And this is what I've tried to do. Chief Pugh, for example, has extensive background in the court, managing the court system. Our field operations chiefs have extensive backgrounds in their career for these experiences that they're now in command of, these positions. And that's the right way to do it. If you put someone in a chief's job that is not familiar with the inner workings, it takes a little while to get on board.